So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about this whole idea of biohacking, and let's kind of just bring it right in terms of nutrition and diet. Like, what are your thoughts just broadly in general when we talk about diet, nutrition, and this whole idea of biohacking?
Yeah, so you mentioned some of this, but I'm just going to maybe repeat some of the things you already
Please.
talked about as it pertains to biohacking. So biohacking really is this extremely broad and definitely not perfectly defined term that covers, a wide range of activities. I mean, and products. I mean, you mentioned cryotherapy and infrared sauna, and but it also covers things like supplements and food. You can really think of it simply, although it's not really simple, as making changes to improve your health and performance and controlling and maximizing what your body can achieve and do. So, everything again, from taking supplements to fasting to infrared saunas to fecal transplants and chip implantations can be forms of biohacking. So, what I always like to think about it in terms of nutrition is when you use good nutrition, when you use nutrition to your advantage, when you put the best things in your body, it's a form of biohacking, right?
Right.
One area of biohacking is focused on how different nutrients affect how you feel and think. And we know that eating a certain way will reduce your risk for disease, and especially reduce your risk for diseases that you're genetically predisposed to, such as maybe Alzheimer's or type 2 diabetes. And so really just tweaking your diet, and I know we're focused on nutrition today, and of course I'm a registered dietitian, so we're really focused on nutrition. We could get into sleep and all those other aspects, but specific to nutrition, what you eat is really a form of biohacking. And as far as it goes to budget, because I know we're talking about biohacking on a budget, the awesome thing about that is that it doesn't necessarily involve things like big, products and going to cryotherapy and, doing all of these things like I mentioned fecal transplants or all these different things. It doesn't necessarily involve all of that. It can be budget friendly because it can really just be some of these simple things that we do on a day-to-day basis that can have a massive impact.
Right. It's interesting because we were always sort of trained to think, look, these are my genes. This is what I was born with, and I'm stuck with it. And I think as we talk about nutrition, we're going to get into this. Clearly, when you look at, perhaps plant-based diets or other forms of nutrition, you can really change or reduce your genetic sort of, issues that people have. I know a very dear friend of mine who had severe cardiovascular disease. He knew it. He was aware of it. He went plant-based. And when you look at the objectified studies that look at what he's done, in a sense, he's kind of really, really reduced that genetic predisposition. So why wouldn't we do that, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's such a good point, right? That's such a good point. And that's like all about, nutrigenomics, right? Is that we are all predisposed to certain things, but our diet and our lifestyle, right, is going to play a huge role in what ends up happening, right? How we
Right.
end up, what we end up getting. Do we end up with this condition? Do we end up with this disease? Or do we end up living a life that is full, where we're full of energy and we're thinking clearly and we're happy, right? What we eat affects our mood. So all
I
of those
think
things are so important.
absolutely. I always kind of try to do analogies with things with people, with my patients I have for decades. And
Me
I
too,
always,
by the way.
right?
Analogies when it comes to nutrition are my favorite. So
It's
I
the
love that. Sorry, I
best.
just had to chime in there and say that
No,
I
I'm
love that.
happy.
I love a
It's
good medical
right,
science nutrition
right.
analogy.
Yeah, you got to break it down and make it understandable. It's like anything else. But I tell people, listen, you can sit down at the poker table of life and you get dealt a hand of cards. There's nothing that says if you play that hand of cards properly and wisely and correctly and in a scientific way, you can bluff your way to the pot and walk away a winner. And that's what I try to get people to do. So there's my analogy.
I love it. I love it.
So let me talk about a very hot topic. And I'm really interested in this because I go back and forth on this, but the idea of intermittent fasting. And, I laugh because over the years, there have been so many different things, right? Fad diets and this and that, and all these things. I go into the break room in my office and I see my nurse like eating like 3 avocados and a pile of oranges. They're like, it's this new diet I'm on. I just need to eat this for 2 months. I'm like, good luck with that. What do you think about, so intermittent fasting has been a big, heavy topic. Maybe we can start by kind of telling our listeners what exactly it is, define it, and what are your thoughts on it? Pros, cons, all that good stuff.
Okay, absolutely. So intermittent fasting is really a broad term that covers following a pattern of eating that involves a set amount of time where you don't eat or eat an incredibly restricted number of calories, followed by one in which you do. So the most popular version involves, and this is the one, again, it's most popular, most people have tried this one or think about, this is what they think of when they think of intermittent fasting, is fitting all of your daily food consumption into about an 8-hour window, followed by those 16 fasted hours. So for example, if you eat between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. every day and fast between 6 p.m. and 10 a.m., including the hours of your sleep.
Right.
So there's also the 5-2 diet, in which you split your week into 5 days of eating whenever you want, and 2 days where you seriously restrict your calories, about 500 for women, maybe 600 for men.
Wow, that's low.
Yeah. But again, on the other 5 days, you're eating more. So while fasting, it may seem extreme and irregular, there are many proponents of it argue that humans actually ate this way for most of history,
Right.
since hunter-gatherers ate as, food was available and not at set meal times. So, and it's also, we know that fasting also, it's an age-old part of many different, religious traditions. So, as far as the potential benefits go, okay, there's always like pros and cons. So the potential benefits, many people try it for weight loss, and research does back up its effectiveness. The most basic reason, though, it can work is because generally you're going to just end up eating less calories, right? You're eating less calories when you're restricting the time that you can eat. So that's one of the reasons that it does work. And then there's also, some research that fasting also reprograms your metabolism. When your body isn't getting energy from food, it turns to other fuel sources like stored fat.
Right.
And by breaking down more fat and shrinking the size of fat cells, you end up with fat loss and as a result, weight loss. So yes, it can work. So one thing I will say though, as far as that, that goes like those 8 hours of eating and then the 16-hour fast, what I generally say is if you want to try it, and I'll tell you why, the people though that I don't think it's good for, and I'm generally not an advocate of it for most people, but that doesn't mean I'm not an advocate of it for everyone. For some people, in some cases, I think it can be good. But for many people, I do think that the 12-hour fast is a really good thing.